Hey, it's Coach Taylor from SmarterTeamTraining.com. I've said on the show many times that the great ones will make time to reach out to you or get back to you if you are willing to just organize your thoughts and send some questions and just build a relationship with others within the field. I think we need to do more reaching out and collaborating with others to find out how we can help the clients and the athletes, the teams, the coaches, the parents, even the administrators that we're working with, and we get the opportunity to make a positive impact on lives that are around us. So I sent an email out after listening to some radio shows, reading some books and articles that Derek Hansen has actually written, and we actually sent this email probably a year and a half ago, and we just kept going back and forth, and I'm lucky enough to get him on the show today. So, Derek, man, I know it's been a long time coming to get you on the show here, my man. I've actually been looking forward to this conversation, to be very honest with you, and I know you can tell that in the emails that I'm sending you. So, man, I'm looking forward to an outstanding conversation and getting a chance to learn from you, my man.
Thank you, Coach Taylor. I'm just happy that you had the persistence and patience to, hang with me and get me on the show here. I know we've had both pretty busy schedules, so this is awesome that we finally connected.
For the listeners of the show here, again, Derek and I have never met in person. This is actually the first time we've talked on the phone. All of our other correspondences have been via email. So I don't know very much about the person. And Derek's going to send me his background and his bio. We'll post it on the description of the show like we normally do. But Derek, my main question when I get someone on the phone is about passion. And I'm a passionate guy. I'm enthusiastic about the field. I enjoy getting in the trenches. I enjoy the research. I enjoy all the other things that go on, presenting video clips and radio shows and all these other things that we can do. I want to know where your passion for the field comes from. I mean, walk me through a little bit about what you have going on now and what really gets you excited about the field at the moment.
I think what makes me passionate is just, and it's going to sound, kind of hokey and everything, but you just want to help people improve. And that's basically how I'm trying to conduct my coaching and my interests and research is okay, we have a case study or an athlete, and they're deficient here, or they want to get to this level, and what do I have to do to make sure they improve? And if you keep it very simple like that, and you make a connection with the person, I think everything kind of comes from there. It's not about I guess a lot of people get excited about technology, but for me, it really is the problem solving to get somebody to improve. And I don't think that's changed throughout my career, because we all know how it was to be an athlete, and you have goals, and you want to find somebody that can help you get there, really. And once you have that sort of mindset where you're going, okay, let's problem solve, let's make sure this person can improve, let's make sure they have a good experience as part of everything too. I think that's where you have to drive your passion. I don't think you can have really detailed specific motivations. I think you have to have kind of a general approach and a general desire, to see people improve, and then the details come out of that. And that's really been my philosophy. I haven't, if I keep it simple like that, I think I stay happy with what I'm doing.
We're starting up basketball season here, getting the winter program started, and one of the first things that everybody wants to improve, and it doesn't make a difference what conversation we have or what verbiage they're using. Generally, movement is a big part of the basketball community and sports in general, for that matter. I mean, when you're assessing movement with a general client or an athlete, either or, doesn't make a difference to me, what should I be considering or even looking for? Walk me through a little bit of how you're walking people through that, enhancing movement patterns before even developing a strength conditioning program.
I mean, the biggest thing for me is, like people have all of these screening tests, and I just actually got off the phone with or Skype with someone. He's working in China, and he's doing talent identification for track and field. He's asking me, what test should I do, and what physiological tests for the most part, and jumping tests and sprinting tests and all sorts of nice tests where you can collect numbers and data. But for me, the tests are nice, but I really need to just sit and watch and see what's going on in terms of their movement. And for the most part, ease of movement, to get to the right positions. And if you have a good eye and you can kind of see what's going on and take it all in sort of a big picture sense, it's very useful for you to draw conclusions from there and go, okay, well, obviously it looks like, there's some mobility issues or flexibility issues. Sometimes it's a strength issue. They just can't get into the right positions because they're not strong enough. And some of it may be just, basic cues and mechanics that you can change by just offering some advice. So, and that was the thing I said to this particular coach, the talent ID coach, is it's nice to be able to collect these numbers, but I want you to have a context as well. So there, while you're watching, I want you to maybe have some subjective markers that you can note, like on a scale of 1 to 5, how is their, posture in a start position? How is their posture getting into acceleration? What are their limb mechanics like? Are they more front side than back side when they run? And these are just, like I said, subjective measures that when you look at the numbers for the sprint, you can go, hey, okay, that makes sense. Like, they were really good in explosive acyclical movements, like a jump, but when they got to the run, there were some technical problems that affected their score. And now you have some context. You can say, technically, visually, this is what I saw, and this is how we can improve it. And I think that's very important. You want to have, obviously, the numbers, but you want to have some discussion points on what we're seeing and what could be improved through other means, whether, like I said, strength, flexibility, just even technical training. And I know genetics is important, but at the same time, if you can just put people in the right positions, loosen things up, things get a lot easier. And one thing I learned at an early age as a coach was that you don't necessarily have to make people stronger by making them stronger. So this person needs to get strong. Well, you need to do this exercise. You need to lift this weight. Sometimes if you loosen them up or create more mobility, they will get stronger. Sometimes if you create better mechanics and more efficiency, they will get stronger, through a simple cue. Sometimes if you give them more recovery between reps, they will express themselves stronger. So, I don't know if I've answered the question specifically, but that's sort of my approach is, using your eyes to kind of do a very sport-specific assessment when they're doing their motions, whether it's on the basketball court or the football field or the soccer field. What do I see? What other information can I bring into the fold to kind of support what I see or, help me with some prescriptions? But it really is, what do you see within the context of their sport? And, that's how I go about it.
I personally don't like putting people in the box, but the conversation that I wanted to have with you was definitely from the speed training, speed development side of things, as we discussed in the email. And I want to talk about one area that I feel is really not discussed very often, and it's actually the ankle joint and the joints of the foot and how important or maybe unimportant they are in speed development. So I'm going to ask a question about how important is ankle and foot training for speed development, and we can include deceleration, agility cutting, those types of things as well, if you wouldn't mind. And tell me a little bit about what you're doing to really take care of that lower leg foot whole complex, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, I think it's very important to have, a multitude of abilities, in that lower leg, foot, ankle complex. And the first one is going to be, whenever you talk about speed or explosive power, is going to be what kind of stiffness do people have down there in terms of creating elasticity. In a sprinter, you want to get the foot up high, bring the knee up, bring the step over the foot, and you want to slam it into the ground with as much force as possible. If you don't have the right amount of stiffness, or strength, elastic strength in that lower limb, it's not, it's going to dissipate. It's going to, get dampened by, too much movement within the joint and the foot itself. So you want a certain amount of elasticity. Conversely, if things are too stiff, you can run into problems with tendon issues, and especially if the volumes get too high. So, you're always walking this fine line between, stiffness, rigidity, power, and obviously range of motion, making sure muscle tone isn't too high at certain points in the training program. So you're balancing off whatever work you're doing. Like, you could be jumps, it could be sprints themselves, because you're always looking at ground contact times and going, okay, when somebody sprints, it's going to be, at a high level, it's going to be less than a tenth of a second. Now, if somebody's doing depth jumps, that could be higher than 0.2 of a second. So, the magnitude is quite different. And, doing depth jumps isn't necessarily specific enough for sprint speeds, because the ground contact times are so different, but maybe you're deriving some other quality, maybe some general stiffness qualities from the depth jumps that can transfer over. So, and then on the other side of that, you want to make sure that we're not doing everything for just stiffness and elasticity. So I'm doing a book right now on plyometrics or human kinetics, and one of the big things we're talking about in this book is how do we start somebody off and how do we manage training. And sometimes it would be something as simple as choosing a surface, the type of surface to jump or run on. So if you're always on a synthetic track or you're always on a hardwood floor, there's a cost, and at some point there could be exhaustion, which could lead to injuries or a detraining effect. So maybe it's not a bad idea to be on a grass surface, a natural grass surface, for a portion of your training to develop different qualities. And I know there's some research out there, and I had a chance to actually invite one researcher. He's out of Calgary, Alberta in Canada. His name's Ben O'Nig, and he did a lot of work on tendon tuning, and I think he did a lot of work for shoe companies to find out what was the best stiffness or softness of a shoe, for performance and injury prevention. And they found that when you went too soft, that things would stiffen up to compensate. So your musculotendon complex in the calf and Achilles tendon would get very stiff from being on too soft a surface or too soft a shoe for too long, and there were repercussions for that. Conversely, if you were spending too much time on a hard surface, things would soften up to dampen the hard surface. So perhaps some sort of mixture of our progression of soft surfaces, to hard surfaces, maybe back on soft surfaces. Maybe there's proportions that we're looking at here of how we divide up the training for different athletes. But being on the same surface all the time for all of your volume, I don't think is the answer. There has to be some variability there, and it has to be proportioned out to the right amount, depending on the time of the season. So I don't think we know enough about, I think it's called tendon tuning and picking certain surfaces. And that's something that I'm interested in is, maybe we should spend more time on grass surfaces, because everything is moving towards artificial turf. And we even see, what the repercussions are at the professional level with being on artificial turf surfaces and the composition of the shoes. They're stiffer and everybody wants more grip, but what are the repercussions? And perhaps it could be more Achilles tendon injuries or more ACL problems. But it's very interesting, that maybe the knee problems are more connected to what's happening at the foot and the surface that you're on. These are the types of things that go through my head. I don't know if anybody's going to listen, but it is food for thought, in terms of how you progress through your training and how you prescribe different amounts of training on different surfaces with different shoes and all that. I think that's pretty interesting.
When we're talking speed development, a lot of times people are thinking the linear version of it, and we also got to consider the vertical element. If you're talking either running or jumping, and let's talk about the landing aspect or the cutting aspect, the deceleration phase has to be something we really pay attention to, and I don't know if that's discussed as much as the acceleration phase and the performance module of just trying to get somebody up to top speed. But, how important is teaching, again, both from the running and the landing aspect, deceleration mechanics in your programming?
It's very important. Now, just because something's very important, you have to be careful not to do too much of it. And anything to do with, hard, powerful eccentric motions, so on decelerations and landings, is going to have a much more profound effect than just, doing more concentric work. So that has to be taken into account. And I'm not saying don't do, the isometric work or the direction change work, but be very careful about how much you do, and maybe keep the quality very high, and then, get in, get out, have your exposure to the stress of it, teach the mechanics of it with good recovery, and then get away from it, right? You don't want to, everything is dosage dependent. But what you see happening is that in a lot of agility programs, they're very volume-based, and the more volume of something you do, the more the intensity is going to be diluted, and also the quality in terms of the mechanics. So watching people do a lot of cone drills and ladder drills and shuttles, it ends up being a conditioning, I was going to say experiment, but it's a conditioning exercise as opposed to building the quality elements of these movements. So, decelerating, dropping the hip, changing your stride frequency as you come in, how you accelerate out of it, how you rotate out of it, how you plant the feet. Those are all really qualitative kind of elements that you should be watching, not necessarily just running the heck out of the kids or the athletes and just going, yeah, we did our agility because they ran around a lot. And that's my biggest thing right now is what is the quality? Like if you're trying to improve something, and even long distance running, if you're trying to improve something, doing more is not always the answer. Doing much better quality, for the most part, is the answer. So, that's the interesting part for me is how do we do things better without getting people hurt, without getting people exhausted. I know everybody loves to see, people rolling around on the ground after a workout saying, wow, that was a good workout because they look tired. But really, what is the end result? What have you improved? Have you improved anything, or have you just made people tired? And, for anything related to speed, deceleration, agility, quickness, I don't think the objective is to make people tired. The objective is to make them better. And that's a pretty significant distinction in my opinion.
I'm very fortunate to have a lot of people come to us after injury, and I mean the fortunate side of it being that they have the trust in us to help them. And I'm very lucky to have unbelievable custom equipment here that really enhances our programming, so we don't really ever miss a beat, because I actually feel that you're only really as healthy as you're going to be on day one, and I feel like the rest of the season is all about working around different injuries or fatigue or whatever else we have going on, just the aches and pains of just being athletes. I mean, when we're talking post-rehabilitation, what are some special considerations that you might have in your program? I mean, from a speed side of things, how are you working around fatigue, injury, even weaknesses, and addressing those areas?
Well, I'll speak to a specific example, and I spend a lot of time working on hamstring rehabilitation and, providing consultations to people on how to carry that out. And for the most part, I use running, sprinting, whatever you want to call it, running as kind of a means of facilitating rehabilitation, because ultimately most of these sports, you got to get people back to running. So at some point you have to get running involved as early as possible and safely as possible, so that they have, a significant exposure to running and working the mechanics and working the muscles as they should. Where I see a lot of the time, people are in clinical settings and they're doing isolated exercises, which they deem safe, but it's really delaying, getting to the root of the problem, which is, can we get them to run again? And there's just something about the cyclical nature of running that allows you to see where the problems are. If you get somebody to do one rep of something, you could miss it. When you see them running in a cyclical manner, things get magnified, and I just like having, whether it's a knee rehab, ankle, hamstring, quad, whatever, as part of our rehab, we get them to do some sort of run as part of the assessment. And that gives me a lot of information on how to modify things from there. So the question is, how do you get them to run early on and keep it safe? Because, it's a pretty dynamic movement, particularly in a hamstring pull. People are like, well, that's how they pulled it, so we shouldn't do it. When my argument is, well, that's how they did it, that's how they injured themselves, so that's what needs to be part of the solution. And maybe I'm nuts, but it seems to work very well, because the more that you protect people and don't expose them to the stresses that put them where they are, the less prepared they're going to be, quite honestly. And everybody's concerned about liability, and for good reason, but people get better by exposing them to stress. And that's no different in rehabilitation. It's just how much stress do you prescribe, and in what sequence. So a lot of the time we will start with basic running drills as part of the initial rehab. So if they can't run or they don't feel comfortable, they can march with high knees, they can eventually skip with high knee drills, and they can do a running high knee drill. And sometimes that could just be on the spot. They don't have to move forward. They could just do it on the spot, and then when they feel more comfortable, okay, now move forward. Because the mock drills, the high knee drills and all these different things he came up with are very good for developing vertical force qualities and postural qualities that you require in running to run fast. So let's do them standing, let's do them walking, let's do them skipping, let's do them running. How do you feel? I feel really good. And for the most part, you can do those drills safely as a preparatory sequence before you get them into running. And once they get into running, everything seems to work really well. And I did that with recently. I did that with an Achilles rehabilitation, where we started them on the spot, walking, marching, and for the most part, a lot of rehabilitation people say, well, we don't want them doing any running coming off of the boot. We want them just to do very easy exercises and, not tax it too much. Where we kind of did the opposite, where we had them putting the foot down with some degree of aggression and velocity, and the athlete responded much better and came back a lot quicker and had much more confidence, and we got them running within a number of weeks coming out of the boot. And, it made sense to me, but obviously it shocked a lot of other people. But the running is something that's very intuitive, I think, for athletic human beings, and you want to get them there as soon as possible. So that's kind of my, it's maybe different than somebody else's rehabilitation approach, but I just found that that's an area where I feel very comfortable. We get very significant results, profound results very quickly. And guess what? The athletes feel good because they know that, hey, if I'm running, I'm very close to being where I need to be. But if you have them cooped up in a clinical setting and they're doing single leg exercises on the spot, it's not as fun. So, that's been my experience with the rehabilitation side. Is running is a very big staple or foundation for me.
If you're talking movement, somebody's going to bring up the concept of flexibility, and I don't necessarily mean it from a bend over and touch your toes standpoint, but from a dynamic movement standpoint. I want to discuss the concept of muscle and even the fascia, potentially even the CNS, and how that's incorporated into how our body perceives movement, or even the flexibility, range of motion, those types of things. I mean, how are you ensuring that you're keeping the muscle, the fascia, even the CNS for working properly with regard to movement and movement mechanics? I mean, if you look back even 5 years ago, everybody was claiming you had to do foam rollers, and if you look out, 5-10 years before that, everybody had to do some type of static stretching beforehand, and now we went to dynamic movement. And I mean, there's so many trends that are going on with this whole concept of flexibility. I mean, walk me through what has worked for you, please.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone full circle with all these things too, and I think in the mid '90s, I took a couple of courses in myofascial release, and they were very useful in terms of resolving chronic pain and some injuries, even some stuff on myself like low back issues, and so that was very interesting. And the other part of it is working with physical therapists with some of the athletes I had. And some of it was trial and error, and some of it was very applied and specific. But everything that I've done has brought me to this point where you have to treat every individual differently. And some people are going to respond more to stretching, and it may even be a placebo effect. It may be that it makes them feel safe. It makes them feel like, okay, I've done it. I feel better. I feel like I've done what I needed to do, and now I'm ready to go. Whereas there'll be some athletes who don't need to stretch, or don't need to foam roll or whatever, and they're just ready to go. And the more you make them do that stuff, it might take them out of that zone where they need to be. So, I think the only thing I can recommend to coaches, young coaches, is, don't be afraid to experiment a little and find out what, makes your athletes feel better. Is it just that they feel better? Like my whole issue with the foam rolling is, some people feel better from doing it. Well, or they feel different. Yeah, it feels a little different. Okay, well, how does that translate into your performance in our training session? And if you look flat, then maybe the foam rolling is actually bringing muscle tone down too much, especially for explosive activities, and maybe creating fatigue. Because there is, again, if you're reaming on somebody with a roller and they're on it and they're, and there's creating some pain and discomfort while they're rolling, there's a consequence. And while they may feel looser, there may be a fatigue effect from that, like just working a motor point too much and this having it exhaust itself. And then, you put somebody on a basketball court and they have no coordination, they have no strength, no pop. So you want to be very careful with all of these different modalities and techniques to make sure that you're not affecting their readiness in a negative way. And that's the same with static stretching. Like everybody looks at static stretching. Oh, no static stretching before any explosive activity. Yeah, but if I have an athlete who has, some mobility issues in their hip and they're just not getting into the right positions, whether it's a start or, an acceleration, maybe there's something we can do to enhance the mobility there, and it may be a static stretch that helps them. So, don't rule things out just, to be dogmatic. Experiment a bit. Everybody's going to have a different means of getting to their end result, but, there's going to be more trends that come out and things that, people, hey, this is the answer, and it's, it's just another tool, evaluate it. You may find it's not useful for athlete A, but for athlete B, maybe they can do a bit of it. But and then also find a good physical therapist that you trust, and they can help you with that call in terms of like, is the athlete ready? How do they feel? Because even they're putting their hands on the athlete, they can feel things that the athlete can't communicate or that you can't see. So that's not a bad sort of relationship to have with a therapist, where you can work with them and get feedback from them on the status of an athlete prior to a training session, or even after a training session. So, there's lots of different things you got to keep your eyes on. But just don't be too rigid with any one technique, because, I've seen it all the time where, yeah, this is what I did as an athlete, so I'm doing it with all my athletes. Yeah, but you're different than all these athletes, so just keep that in mind.
Derek, man, I've never seen you present. I've never seen you coach, as we've already said on the show here. But I'm always curious to know also, if I had a chance to listen to you talk or get in a huddle with you and hear how you inspire greatness in others, what's one big motivational message you have for potentially the young up-and-coming strength and conditioning coaches, personal trainers, physical therapists in our field? Maybe a message that you would like to hear when you were back in the day, green behind the ear, just getting ready to rock and roll. And then also maybe even a suggestion for people who've been in the trenches for a while. I mean, what could you do to help them really get over the hump and achieve their own greatness?
I've never been one that either as an athlete responded to people yelling and screaming at me, and I don't really do that as a coach. So that's not really my forte. I don't necessarily agree that that's the way to motivate people. I was more of the analytical type of person. Like, if I knew that I had somebody in my corner preparing me that had the experience and the intelligence and the knowledge and the wisdom and the plan to get me where I needed to be, that was enough for me. Like, that was inspiring for me. Like, wow, I got this guy, coaching me, or this person coaching me, and they've accomplished a lot, and now I feel very confident in their hands. And coming to workout, knowing that we had a plan, knowing that we were going to move forward and get results, that's very motivating to me. So I don't know if that's everybody's approach, and it doesn't need to be, but at the same time, I think that has to be part of it. Like, you can still come in and you can bring lots of energy, and you can get excited, And as long as it's positive, I'm all for it. I'm not a big fan of people, trying to make people mentally tough by being negative or degrading people. And hey, that's just the way I look at it. I don't think it's necessary. I think we can make a lot of positive gains and motivate people by being just positive and telling them, like, you can trust what we're doing, because, I'm very open to have athletes ask why we're doing what we're doing. And that's how I was taught. Like, I wanted to know why we're doing this. And if somebody gave me a very good explanation, then I bought in. And that's how I encourage my athletes to ask me, like, hey, anytime you have questions about what we're doing, please ask and I'll explain it. And then that'll, make it clear to you that, we know what we're doing here. And the sort of blind following is not really part of the equation. It's nice if you have somebody who's very knowledgeable and you just, you don't question them and you just go for it. That's great too. But for young coaches out there who are trying to get, athletes motivated, obviously bring the energy. At the same time, make sure you're prepared and make sure that you have a good approach and plan, so that everybody can get confident about it and get behind it. And, that energy is going to come. When people are tired and fatigued, and, everybody wants to talk about pushing through fatigue, which is what you have to do in sport. But at the same time, you have to be very careful that if fatigue is excessive, you could be setting yourself up for injury or poor training experience, detraining, which can seriously negate positive motivation. And so if somebody gets injured from a training session, you know what? Not just that person is going to be negatively affected. Everybody at that training session is going to be negatively affected by seeing somebody get hurt. And you'll see it in any sport. When somebody goes down, the energy comes down. So if you're managing the fatigue properly and, having positive feedback, everything's going to be, very positive. And if people are having success, success breeds success, and success breeds, more motivation. I've never seen somebody who, did something really awesome, and not get excited about it and not have the other people on the team get excited about it. But when people are having constant failures, somebody's running gassers or suicides in basketball, and they're not hitting the time, and and then you make them run again because they didn't get their time, and they make them run again. Like, first of all, how is that going to make things better? Second of all, what is the impact on the motivation of the players? To keep doing that, it's not good. So, there's a psychology behind it, but it's pretty clear to me that you have to create an environment for success, where the athletes can be successful, and then that breeds more success and more enthusiasm.
Well, Derek, man, I know you're a busy guy, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you here. If anybody had any questions about what we discussed, or maybe they wanted to reach out to you to learn more about speed training or rehab or anything for that matter, some of the book articles that you've written or the chapters that you've written in books, etc., how could they go about reaching out to you and finding out more information about what you got going on?
One of the easier ways is to go on to the website that we have. It's www.strengthpowerspeed.com, and we've had that site for quite a while, probably about 10 years, if not more. And really, a lot of it's just blog posts, and just we have myself that's a major contributor, but we have other experts that contribute articles, and we try to have something up there every week. And as part of it, obviously, we sell some products and things as well, which reflect our approach and our philosophy. So that's probably the first place to go. I try to be pretty, committed to having social media posts that are meaningful. So on Twitter, I'm at Derek M. Hansen. Derek M for Matthew, Hansen, Hansen. And those will link to the website, and even again, Facebook and all those things. I'm trying to put stuff out there that I think reflects, what has been successful for me. I'm working on a book for human kinetics on plyometrics that hopefully is out within a year, and just trying to, come up with stuff that is advanced, but at the same time very simple to implement. And one of the things I'm working on with a couple of my colleagues is coming up with an actual speed coaching or sprint coaching certification program, because that's what I find at least in the strength and conditioning community and physical preparation community. A lot of people are very comfortable or very confident in their ability to prescribe weightlifting. They're not so comfortable on the speed side, and the running mechanics, which again I talked about in the rehabilitation side, are very useful. So if you can get them up to speed, pardon the pun, on how to program for speed and integrate it with the lifting and the plyos and everything else they do, then you have I think you have a very valuable coach there, because it's one thing to know how to do stuff in the weight room, but if you can't work outside the weight room, most of these sports involve running, so why would you not make that one of your top priorities? So one of the things I'm trying to do is I've had this domain, sprintcoach.com, and we're going to turn that into sort of a learning environment for sprint coaching and speed coaching, and so not just track and field, but for the most part team sports and other sports, and even sports that are unrelated to sprinting. Like we're doing work right now with a golf academy, and we're teaching kids how to sprint and get derived benefits from the speed training, whether it's velocity of limbs or just the central nervous system benefit of running fast, and seeing how it transfers to their golf abilities, particularly club head speed and driving distance. So we've had some success there. So it's not just for sprinting athletes. It could be for other groups that want to try something different. Maybe the kids don't like being in the weight room, and I've encountered that a lot. They just don't feel comfortable lifting weights. They don't like it. It doesn't make them feel like they want to feel. We get them sprinting. That provides a great general nervous system stimulus. It can transfer. Kids have fun. It's a natural activity. And so at sprintcoach.com, I think we're going to try to really develop, some resources for people to take advantage of sprinting and speed development.
Again, Derek, man, it's a privilege to talk to you, my man. Thank you very much for being very professional, getting back to me in a timely manner on the emails. Again, this is a long time coming, so I'm pretty excited to post this up for the listeners of the show here. To have you on the show is definitely an honor, my man. So hopefully this is a launching pad for us to do many more things down the road. I know we are presenting and speaking in different circles at times, but I know our paths are going to cross here soon. So, man, I'm looking forward to keeping in touch. And if you're ever in the Baltimore area, man, be sure to look me up. And obviously, if I can go to the border, I'm going to make sure I find a way to get to you, buddy.
Oh, definitely. Thank you very much, Coach Taylor. This has been awesome, and I know you provide fantastic resource for coaches, and everybody is benefiting from the work you're putting in. And yeah, definitely, I want to catch up with you in person. And if you ever want to come up to Vancouver and hang out, you're more than welcome. Probably better to come, spring, summer when there's less rain. But yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's been great.